Good morning, and thank you for joining Allocadia's live demo this morning. My name is Richard Sharp. I'm joined today by Allocadia's CTO, Ryan Muffles. Today we're focusing on investment planning and budgeting for Eloqua. The goals for our session today are really to explain how Allocadia and Eloqua complement each other. Eloqua is a very powerful marketing automation solution, fantastic when it comes to campaign execution. However, pretty limited when it comes to helping you manage the investments to support campaigns. Allocadia, on the other hand, also a cloud solution. Allocadia is the leading budgeting planning, budget management, and ROI management solution. And the two systems work very well together. So our goal is going to be also to show you how the systems actually interoperate, so the sort of information that can flow between the systems. And then finally, to talk a little bit about how the combination of the systems can benefit your organization as modern marketers. So just before we jump into the demo proper, I'd just like to take a couple of minutes to provide you with a little bit of context. So there are three key challenges that we commonly hear from CMOs and, by extension, marketing operations teams and marketing teams themselves. So the first challenge is getting visibility into marketing plans. So really being able to drill down into what the organization is trying to achieve by specific marketing investments. How much of the organization planning to spend perhaps on product A versus product B, in EMEA versus Asia Pacific for different territories. Or indeed how the marketing organization is planning on supporting different strategic objectives that the company has. The next challenge is marketing investments and getting visibility into marketing investments. So although that might be manageable on an individual basis in a spreadsheet, but still not optimal, when it comes to a large organization where collaborate, or potentially hundreds of people are trying to collaborate, suddenly keeping visibility in real time into your planned investments, your forecast investments, what's being committed to be spent, and your actual spend becomes very difficult, and it becomes very difficult to maintain the level of agility that modern marketers require. And then finally, number three here, getting clarity on return on marketing investment. Always a challenge for marketers, but today modern marketers really feel the need to demonstrate the contribution that marketing is actually making to the organization. So we hear these three things again and again. Now, it may sound on the surface of it that this isn't particularly difficult, but when you actually think about the sort of the systems and the processes that companies are typically using today, it all starts with spreadsheets. Although spreadsheets are fantastic sort of personal productivity tools, they're very easy to adopt, they're very prone to error. They really make collaborating very difficult. If you're trying to collaborate with 2, 3, 10, 100 people on spreadsheets, very quickly you completely lose control. And when it comes to consolidating all these individual spreadsheets back into a master view, often the role of the marketing operations team, again, this becomes very problematic, very, very time-consuming, very complex, and very difficult to go and provide real-time visibility into what's really happening in the organization. Next, the financial data in terms of the purchase orders that marketing is cutting and the invoices that ultimately that come in against those. Once they're being captured in your financial system or your ERP system, they're really not in a form that's easy for marketers to get access to. And often, we end up having to go and re-enter the data again in another system, or spend a bunch of time trying to reconcile between our financial system and whatever we're using in marketing, perhaps spreadsheets. And the finance team have their own reasons for the way that they need to sort of organize invoices and purchase orders by account code. It's really not the way that marketers see it from a sort of organizational hierarchy or sort of campaign or marketing spend type. Next, we typically see that actually organizations don't have this bit of data anywhere. So there's a need to be able to track sort of the rationale for why a bit of marketing investment has been planned in the first place. What corporate objectives are you supporting? What products are you trying to invest in go-to-market activities for? And how are different regions planning to invest and how much? As a result, it becomes really almost impossible to try to communicate to stakeholders what's being invested and what the reasons for those investments actually are. And then finally, from a marketing ROI perspective, there are a bunch of systems that have results data that really you want to be able to go and combine back to the original marketing investments. They're held in systems like CRM systems, so for example, Salesforce.com and NetSuite give you visibility into the opportunity pipeline that's being built, and ultimately the revenue that gets converted is associated with marketing campaigns, but the things need to be connected together. Marketing automation systems like Eloqua can give you great visibility into the traction you're getting from a campaign and the number of marketing qualified leads that are being generated. But again, difficult to go and tie those back to original investments. And from a social perspective, social management suites give you visibility into mentions, shares, and reach, and so forth. And you're spending money to go and make those things happen. But making those connections to sort of those sort of predictive metrics is again very difficult to do. And these things are really what Allocadia exists to solve. So Allocadia is a solution designed for marketers, it's cloud-based, and it pulls together sort of the life cycle of the marketing dollar from marketing planning, where you're going to spend money, managing the actual spend process with marketing investments, and ultimately pulling back into the system based on this foundation of really understanding the investments you're going to make, the results that correspond with those investments from a marketing ROI perspective. So let me quickly just try to sort of bring that back into sort of an Eloqua campaign context. We have a super simple, almost trivial Eloqua campaign here. Starts with an email invite. We're going to send that marketing invite to a list that we've rented. And we're going to be driving people to a landing page for an online event, much like the one today, where we're going to collaborate with the analytics firm IDC. So here there's going to be a bunch of activity. We need to be able to go and associate this Eloqua campaign with a bunch of marketing spend. So that's the first thing that we need to do. As that campaign gets executed, there's also going to be a whole bunch of campaign metrics to go and associate again. And ultimately, those things need to flow into some sort of solution that's going to give you visibility into marketing ROI. There's also data in your finance system. So in the simple example we've got here, we've got a list rental of $5,000, some infrastructure costs associated with doing a GoToWebinar, and sponsorship costs for working with an analyst firm like IDC in our example here. And those cost details can flow across from your finance system or your ERP system into your marketing ROI and marketing budgeting planning solution. And then finally, you're going to end up with, as I mentioned a moment ago, opportunity pipeline and ultimately revenue that comes as a consequence that you can attribute to this campaign. And that's where Allocadia fits in, giving you a platform for the planning and managing spend, and then building on that foundation to pull in financial data from financial systems, campaign information from campaign execution systems like Eloqua, and revenue results from CRM systems like Salesforce in our example here. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Ryan. We're going to jump into the Allocadia solution and actually give you a look at how this works in reality. Great, thank you, Richard.
So I'm going to go ahead and log into the application here. We're stating sort of the obvious that we're in a web browser here, so there really is not much else it takes to deploy Allocadia to your users other than for them to have a modern web browser. It's an on-demand application. And the first thing we're going to see is the Home tab. And this is actually a great starting point to understand how budgets in Allocadia are structured. Even though you may think of a marketing organization's budget as really sort of one set of numbers, we allow customers to break that budget down into multiple budgets that roll up to form a master budget. So here we see an organizational hierarchy of budgets, and actually these can be structured in any way you want. It's not just a convenience feature of organizing the budgets. The way you structure them actually makes a difference to various things. The first thing is the data visibility rules. And so in this case, we might have them organized by region. We might have it organized by type of marketing campaign. That's going to determine who is going to be able to see what budget in the hierarchy. So if I had a particular user who is maybe the director of field marketing, I might have them assigned to this level, and when they logged in, they would actually see field marketing as the top item in the hierarchy. Now, maybe if I had somebody else really low in the organization who just worked on, some one particular program, I might have them assigned here and so on. And so right now we're logged on as perhaps somebody like a CMO or an administrator where you can really see the full extent of the hierarchy. Now, the other obvious thing that the hierarchy does is it allows budget numbers to flow down through the hierarchy. So if I had a $10 million budget at the top level, I might have that break down across various different organizations and different teams to flow down to the various campaigns that are actually spending that money. Let's go ahead and have a look at what a budget actually looks like. So I'm going to open up this PR budget. And you'll notice this sort of a spreadsheet metaphor here, which is definitely kind of a key design goal of ours. We sort of feel like the metaphor of a spreadsheet, rows and columns and sort of some fields being input, some fields being formulas. That's actually a great metaphor, and that resonates with a lot of people. That's not what's broken. What's broken is more the mechanical side of actually trying to use Excel and trying to collaborate on files and trying to manage multiple versions and spreadsheet formula errors and all these sort of things. So what we tried to do is take that metaphor of a spreadsheet and enhance it and customize it for the business process of marketing budgeting. So I'll point out a few things. One, we have the built-in hierarchy here, just like we saw on the Home tab. We have a hierarchy within the budget, right? So this PR budget, we have a total. It breaks down to categories like newsletters, and then here we have subcategories like a monthly newsletter with a particular campaign we're running. And then we have individual line items that the spend is actually occurring on. We have customizable columns. So these columns can be all different variations of plans and budgets and forecasts and actuals, and they can be by month, by quarter, by year, lots of different ways to organize that. We have sort of filtering, we have calculated fields, we can lock columns, so I might take my my budget item that we sort of fix at the beginning of the year, and we'll lock that in. And we also have different views, so depending on who I am and what I'm doing, I can have a different view of this spreadsheet. So far it probably makes sense. Now we start to sort of add some features that are a little bit more out of the box. So we have the idea of tags. So sure, there's a number here. I've come up with this forecast column, but I can actually indicate is this actually occurred? Is it optional? And again, these are customizable, whatever fits your business process. And I get visual indicators based on the value of that tag. I have the ability to quickly come in and edit a number. Again, this is really simple. One of the things we see with a lot of competitors is these really heavy form interfaces that are really sort of clicky and slow. This is quick editing. Change it. The numbers edit. It's sort of really that simple. So one of the most interesting things that I think that we've added here is this idea of what we call a details panel. So I'm going to highlight the monthly newsletter campaign here, and I'm going to bring up this details panel. What this allows us to do is associate a bunch of other information elements with that campaign. So, Richard talked about corporate objectives. So there may be, maybe there's 5 or 6 different campaigns that relate to, brand awareness or to partner enablement. Well, if you can associate and create that linkage between the campaigns and these objectives, which you can define, you can later report on various marketing activities by objective. That's just one example. You can have all kinds of different fields that are totally customizable. So these could be just a simple input. They could be drop downs. Here we've got sort of region. If the budget wasn't organized by region, we can organize it that way. Various kinds of marketing objectives by target audience. And then we can even do things like sort of attach documents and dates and all kinds of interesting things. And we'll see later when we get to the reporting where that really becomes useful. But the main thing I want to talk about as we sort of bring the conversation back to what specifically do we do with Eloqua is we have a connector for Eloqua. And what it allows you to do is connect up your Eloqua instance to Allocadia, and we bring back all the campaigns and bring them into Allocadia and allow you to associate the campaign name. So you see here I have this Allocadia category called monthly newsletter, and here I've associated that with the Eloqua campaign called monthly newsletter. And what that really allows you to do is then link all the budget and cost data in Allocadia with sort of the results and all the downstream effect that that campaign is going to have, and we'll look at that shortly. So now, we talked a lot about sort of the budgeting process. How do I put budget numbers in? How do I collaborate on that? How do I have them all roll up correctly? But Richard also, I think, hit on a key point, which was sort of the actual investments, right? So as you actually spend money throughout the year, how does that make its way into the system? And we actually have the ability to import both purchase orders and actuals, which could be sort of invoices or whatever fits your business process. And the key here is that you can import these items, and you can have them sort of have a workflow where you can push these down to the various users. Sort of the way I like to think of it is you sort of have this hierarchy of budgets. You sort of have a hierarchy of users assigned into that. You want to push the invoices down to the people at the lowest level who understand exactly what marketing activity those various invoices are associated with, and have them link them. So we don't want to organize things by accounting code, because that's not really useful. We want to look at the spend we make and organize it by a campaign and by budget items. And that's really where we sort of get the ability to sort of slice and dice it later. And again, we may see one item, perhaps that the analyst firm cost, looks like one item, but there may be several invoices related to that, or there may be an invoice that's half for that and half for something else, so we can split that up here. So that's a little bit of a look at the process of sort of planning the budget and tracking actuals as they come in. Let's wrap up this demo by looking at the analytics. What's really interesting here is now we sort of get to, we've done all the work of linking all this stuff. We get to sort of get the benefit of all that. So there's about 50 reports that comes out of the box. These are all totally customizable. You can add your own, customize what these look like. It's not a really technical task. I think typically a power user or administrator would be able to work with this. So here we're looking at sort of the classic report you would expect out of a system that does budgeting, which is what was my plan, what was my actual, and what do I have left to spend. In addition to sort of providing the simple numbers here, we've got that depicted visually and some interesting ways to slice and dice that. So we can look at the sort of the category, right? So the type of budget that we have assigned and what's left to spend. We might want to look at it by target audience. Now remember, target audience was a field that we had configured on the details panel. And because we now associate each campaign with a target audience, we can now look at our plan where we're planning to invest our money across target audience. So you can start to imagine how that becomes powerful, and you can sort of add your own fields there. We can look at it sort of by organization. So here it's sort of interesting. Channel marketing obviously looks like that they've spent a lot more than their plan was. Maybe Benelux is a bit of a problem because they had a decent sized budget and haven't spent any of it. So those are sort of indicators that you may want to sort of have a look at that and figure out what's going on, and sort of the various ways to look at the plan and actual stuff. So the budgeting side, this is typically reports that you would come back to fairly regularly throughout the year. And then the last piece I wanted to touch on was the ROMI, return on marketing investment. And this is really the interesting stuff where I'm going to show the Eloqua specific report here, where we're able to link the cost information that's coming into Allocadia, where the investments are being made, to what's happening with those investments. So specifically with Eloqua, we built a report, sort of marked it up a little bit here. You obviously don't have to have sort of the red E's on your reports, but sort of wanted to highlight the pieces of data that were coming from Eloqua versus the pieces of data that were coming from Allocadia. So here we can see we have a list of some of the campaigns. There's that monthly newsletter campaign we were just looking at. We're able to roll up all the investment that was made on that, and that comes from Allocadia. But down here we've also been able to import the Eloqua campaigns, and we've been able to look at the various metrics that are associated with Eloqua campaigns. So especially for electronic campaigns here, you've got, you can imagine sends and how many were delivered, how many were opened, how many were clicked. I mean, you sort of think of the marketing funnel, these are really sort of the top of the funnel metrics, and in fact we've even got them depicted here in a funnel chart. And because we can correlate these results to the costs, we can actually calculate up here things like what was the cost per delivery of this newsletter? What was the cost per open? What was the cost per click? It's really valuable information because often you'll sort of see a campaign that looks to be successful, but maybe you hadn't done the math and realized that even though it produced a lot of results, it was really expensive to run. And perhaps beefing up your investment in a smaller campaign would be more advantageous. And then there's just all kinds of ways you can slice and dice this by various campaigns. A couple more I'll point out. A really interesting one is not just looking at the overall metrics at the top of the funnel, but looking at the bottom of the funnel stuff, so specifically pipeline and actual revenue generated. So because here we have a linkage to the CRM system, we can associate the sales opportunities that have been influenced by those marketing programs, and we can look at the actual amount of revenue that was brought in, and we can divide that and actually get what sort of seems to be the holy grail these days, which is the return on marketing investment for various campaigns. And we can do this by campaign here. We can do it by type of campaign. At the bottom, we've got what a CMO may look like, which is maybe by marketing objective. You remember earlier we sort of associated these campaigns to an objective. Well, how interesting would it be to see that for a particular marketing objective, what was the return on investment as compared to other objectives? You can see it by team and so on. So there's lots here, but I want to keep the demo short because we only have a few minutes, so I'm going to pass it back to Richard.
Fantastic, thank you, Ryan. Really shows, I think, how when you have sort of the clarity and a good foundation built on a marketing plan, and then sort of detailed information around spend, and then you layer on returns information from different systems, and you really get a sort of powerful, sort of integrated view of what's happening in the marketing organization and what the contribution of marketing is. So we just have a couple of minutes. I just wanted to share a quick case study with you. So Juniper Networks are a joint Allocadia and Eloqua customer, so kind of makes them relevant for today. Juniper started working with us. That identified that they had a pretty significant challenge internally managing budgets and managing the planning process associated with those budgets. Just like a lot of organizations, they were stuck using Excel, spending a huge amount of time trying to get an accurate picture of what was happening and just consolidating a ton of information, spending a lot of time and really just not giving them the kind of agility that modern marketers really expect today. So they looked at a variety of solutions, selected Allocadia. They deployed Allocadia on a global basis across their theaters around the world. They're using Allocadia to manage their marketing budget as well as their partner market development fund, MDFs. So a large deployment, and one of the things we often see with Allocadia is companies will either go and deploy in a region and then spread across the globe afterwards, or they'll do what Juniper did here and do a global deployment in one go. And you'll often see a large proportion of an organization's marketing team and a few people from finance using Allocadia to really kind of get visibility into what's happening from a spend perspective. And in Juniper's case, they now have over 250 worldwide users in Allocadia, which equates to, I think it's about 80% of their total marketing team. So a lot of usage and incredibly high adoption rates across the business. All of this was achieved in only 6 weeks. So 6 weeks from signing contracts, Juniper were live using Allocadia. So it's not a complex, long, painful process that you may associate with these kinds of solutions. Okay, so we just have a couple of minutes for a couple of questions that have come in from attendees today. So the first one, Ryan, I'll put this question to you if you don't mind. Can you say a little bit more about how Allocadia brings in financial data into the system?
Yeah, we set up really sort of a flat file exchange system. So I guess there's really sort of 3 ways to do it. I'll start with sort of the most rudimentary and going up to sort of the most advanced. So the most rudimentary way is, as like any spreadsheet, you can literally just go in and type the numbers right in the spreadsheet. So if you really want to do that, and in some exception cases, you can edit them, although it's not really something we would recommend, obviously. for a large organization, but you do have that flexibility. The next level up is that you can take these exports from your financial system, these flat files, and you can import them into Allocadia. They don't have to have exact field structures. You can actually map them during the import process. So we can sort of, depending on what you called a certain field, we can map that into what Allocadia deems that particular field. And then the really nice way to do it is we've actually recently added an automated import of these. So if you can create one of these files on an automated basis and drop it in a location accessible, such as a secure FTP drop, and give us a read-only account, we will come in, maybe every Monday night at 2 o'clock in the morning or something, and import that data for you and load it up into Allocadia. So really lots of options, sort of from the simple manual up to the fully automated system for getting that.
That's great, thank you, Ryan. I guess to add to that as well, one of the benefits of us with Alicadia just consuming data from a financial system is it doesn't become a sort of a complex IT integration project. It's something that can be achieved pretty rapidly. Great. The next question we had was, I'll sort of paraphrase, it's pertaining to people often have quite strong ties to spreadsheets that they've built and potentially been using for years. The question really relates to, can people still sort of get a view that kind of gives them what they were really trying to achieve in their own spreadsheet that feels kind of familiar?
Yeah, I think I briefly touched on it, but I can say a little bit more about it. I mean, there's really two things. It's partly about views, but a view in our budget view is really made up of columns. So it's worth just reiterating again that the columns are completely customizable, right? So what you track and what cardinality you track that with is totally up to you. And then, yeah, the view feature allows you to have predefined sets of these columns. So you might have one set which just shows you quarterly forecast totals. You might have one view which shows you monthly plan versus actual and what your variance is. And so, yeah, you can have a whole bunch of views. That feature is used fairly heavily, I think, by our clients for that exact reason, to provide different people at different times of the marketing lifecycle the right view that they need.
Okay, thank you. And the final question I'll take. So there's a question around sort of the typical cost for Allocadia. So really no such thing as typical cost. Depends on your organization. Our pricing is very transparent. It's up on the website. But the most popular version of Allocadia is priced at $99 per user per month, and then scales just based on the number of users that are using the system. So very straightforward to get an idea of what the total cost could be for an organization. Particularly if you sort of factor that somewhere between 50 and 75% of marketers would normally have a seat in Allocadia ultimately. Okay, so just going to close out. We're just about at the 30 minutes. I'd like to thank you all very much for attending today. I hope you found the session useful, and it's given you a bit of a taste for how Eloqua and Alicadia can complement each other and solve some of the budgeting challenges associated with executing campaigns, as well as helping you get a handle on sort of your overall budgeting process. If you have any questions, Ryan and my contact details are up on the screen here. Please shoot us an email, give us a call, and ask us any other questions that you may have. Thank you very much for your time.